for giving me this opportunity. And it's like home, as I said, like when I saw Rekha, I felt like home. So, Dr. Naini, thank you so much for your efforts. I know your efforts, how much you have kept to bring this workshop. We are planning since almost 3 months from now. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. As Naini said, probably I try to not bore you guys and try to give some good take-home points at the end of the day, so that at least the main concept, if you look at the design here, it's all about unlocking the success of IUI. So the main concept we are not will understand the key how to unlock the success of IUI. A lot of people think that IUI is a very simple process. Just you need to take the semen, you just have to inseminate and just wait. We give some luteal phase support and you just wait. But trust me, it's a very important process where subtle changes in your probably some stimulation or your semen preparation or your insemination can definitely give results to the patients, right? How many of you are here doing IUIs? Okay, very few people. So basically, IUI is the first step any fertility patient can undergo, right? It's the first thing. We have how many options we have in IVF? We have only three. Juggling with these three processes, you try this, otherwise you land up in IVF. But if you do a proper IVF, you can reduce the patient coming to IVF. Okay. So today my my session is all about practical things. I want all of you to be more proactive. You can stop me, make it more interactive session, not like a theory talk. You stop me in between. It's a workshop. So I'm going to discuss some cases in IUI where you can expect some issues or how to overcome those issues. The talk is all about that, right? Age, duration of infertility, semen quality, how do you do the semen preparation. We have a hands-on workshop in the afternoon where each and every doctor are going to prepare the IUI sample by their own. They assess the pre-ward sample, post-ward sample, how good is your sample. You have some excellent gifts coming up for the first top 5 doctors who have done the excellent semen preparation. It's like proper exam, right? So I'm a bit of a strict teacher, right? So it's about semen quality, semen preparation, and the timing. Timing is very important. So what's the total motile counts? What's the indication? Do we need to take bed rest? There are a lot of questions which arise when we do the procedure. So we are going to clarify all those things today, right? So when you take about the patient selection, first important thing is evaluation of the infertile couple. Very important, right? So a proper evaluation itself gives you a diagnosis which procedure they have to go for. Either it is timed intercourse or IUI or IVF. Evaluation plays a very important role, right? In evaluation, what's the most important thing? Yes, age. History taking is very important. It's not like we are just taking a 5 minutes random history and going ahead, right? In infertility, the first visit plays a very important role. Once you know the detail, or you come to a proper plan for that patient, then you can just speed it up. But the first visit, you should sit with the patient, take a proper detailed history. At least you have to give 15 to 20 minutes for each patient. And the most important thing is, you have to see the patient as a couple. Is what I feel and I focus is on one is menstrual history. Very important. Menstrual history itself will give you a lot of information. Young patient coming with irregular periods, what do you suspect? Older patient coming with irregular periods. Short cycles being regular, suddenly cycles becoming short. Exactly, decreased ovarian reserve. Cycle length, what's the normal average length of menstrual cycle? It is 28 days. Once the ovarian reserve comes down, the cycle length will become short. It becomes as short as 23-24 days cycle. Why? Anybody can answer? gifts for everything today. Why the cycle length comes down as the ovarian reserve comes down?
Some of the anovulated cycles.
No, not an ovulation. Because they will ovulate. It doesn't mean that they are. What's the normal length of the luteal phase?
Short follicular phase actually. Because
Yes, luteal phase is for
14 days.
14 days. That is called for them on day 8. You're also already seeing a follicle of 18 and 20 ml. This is a common scenario we all see. That means this patient ovarian reserve come down, or quality of the oocyte is not good. Something is wrong with that. What is the minimum follicular length to get a good quality oocyte? Anybody? Minimum. At least 9 weeks. At least. If that means if you are getting a dominant follicle at least on 9th or 10th day, that means it is at least a good quality. That means you can expect that it's not a good quality follicle. The success rates of conception in that cycle might be less. So you didn't answer my question, by the way. So why the length of the cycle will come down? One is short follicular phase. Why short follicular phase? Why early LH will increase? Anybody? Because exactly, yes, in a way you're correct. The thing is, recruitment happens before periods. That is the reason. By the time you are doing a scan on day 2 or day 3, there is also already a recruited follicle by 8 mm, 9 mm. If you clearly see the scan on day 2 or day 3, you see a bigger size follicle in these people. So this is very important, small points. But it's very important how you are doing your scan, what is the scan interpretation. What we do, we generally keep a probe and see, just count the AFC and come out. It's not going to work that way. Fertility might be looks like a very simple branch, just you do this, that, but ultimately how much success rate we are giving with IUI? What's the success rate of an IUI cycle?
10 to 20%.
We are struggling for the 10 to 15. We are not doing no justice to the patient. So whatever procedure you are doing, we should be very meticulous, observe, understand why it's happening. Then probably you may not rectify or you may not give results in each and every patient, but at least you know what to do in the next cycle. It's all about next cycle, for me at least. It's all about what you are going to do in the next cycle, how you are going to improvise in the next cycle. Right? So very important. So as I told you, I'm still at the history part. So one is, as I told you, menstrual history. Then what other information menstrual history will give you? What's the normal menstrual flow?
2 to 5 days.
3, decent. 2 is again might be a scanty flow if I say. So 3 to 5 days is a decent menstrual flow. So if the flow is less, what do you suspect? Expect a thin quality oocyte also in those people. Generally, how good quality egg gives good amount of estradiol. Okay, a good follicle produces how much of estradiol? 200, 150, 200, 250, anything around 200. So a good quality follicle, estradiol, what does it do to the endometrium? It proliferates the endometrium. Once you get a good endometrial proliferation, you get a good triple line. What you are seeing in the scan, we all talk about triple line, 3 lines. What is that basically? It's a proliferized endometrium, estrogenized endometrium, if I can say. The word is estrogenized. It means there is a estrogen development on the response on the endometrium. Sometimes the follicle will develop, endometrium doesn't pick up. We all get it. Or you see a thick, hazy endometrium. This is all because the estrogen from the follicle might not be very good. So might not be all cases, but scenarios. But whenever you are seeing, you should always look at the endometrium as well. We tend to ignore the endometrium mostly. We just only go with the follicular size. Size has reached 20 or not, or 18, you give a trigger and you try. That's it. But endometrium also plays a very, very important role. And also it's not only the thickness, it's also about the contour of the endometrium, right? So these are That's about the menstrual history. Obviously, you ask about pain and all, dysmenorrhea and all, you suspect endometriosis and all. But what I feel is flow, length of the menstrual cycle will give you a lot of information what you can expect in her menstrual cycle or when you are stimulating her. I'll already back of the mind, I have a plan that she might be having a poor quality and probably I will go with the injectables than oral in this patient. That's how you analyze, right? So we all know that injectables will give a better, so my stimulation might not, I may tell the patient that I will not go with oral, I'll go with the total gonadotropin cycle or a combination. So it will give you an idea how to plan your stimulation apart from the other parameters. So one, as I told you, one important thing is menstrual cycle. History, everything is important, but I'm highlighting few things which you definitely should insist and look for. And the most other important thing is, anybody in the history? Okay, I'm going to get all the gifts. So the most next important thing is response to the previous stimulation. Very, 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 very important. Right? If the patient is coming direct to you, that's fine. But lot of patients come with already some ovulation induction or some procedure happened to them. If they're coming with that, please go through all the reports very carefully. Very, very important. Gives you lot of information. Patient already ovulated with letrozole. You're again going to start with letrozole. Lot of people do the same thing. Already she has taken almost 6 to 7 cycles of letrozole or clomiphene. She ovulated, sperm is good, still she didn't conceive. Again she comes to you and again you start with letrozole. Are we doing justice by doing that? What difference we are doing from the previous protocol? Might be if we are really lucky, sometimes it may click. But what we are doing as a doctor is there. So that's very important. Why it didn't work out there? Why already the same dose, same protocol, same follicular monitoring, same thing you're doing it. So you have to see what went wrong and change your protocol or add something which can improve the success rates of. Obviously, ultimately, we are working for that 2 lines and ultimately our take home baby. So these are 2 important things about history I want to emphasize on. It's a very important things which we need to all of you should look for in the history aspect. Apart from all the other parameters, all are important. Male, everything, male history, we try to tend to ignore taking the male partner history, but now as I think Rekha, everyone, Naini, everyone will agree with me, now sperm counts have come down drastically and the quality of sperms have come down drastically. We don't know, even in IVFs also where we are using, even we are going for ICSI, what we used to say the advanced technique for male factor infertility, we are still getting not good quality embryos. So sperms have gone down. I don't know, some effect with the COVID, I feel after COVID there is a drastic decline in the sperm count. So I think we need more studies in the sperm aspect. I tell Rajendra to do some studies on the male, come up with some conclusions. See, because all we work on the clinicians, we tend to ignore the lab aspect. We don't know the lab. We just, if you get a semen analysis report, you just go write the reports in your paper and just give the treatment according to it. But you should understand why it is happening. You have to go through thorough history for the male partner. Very, very important. Recently, I have attended one in Hisar, one talk where there is a Aphrodite classification has come for male this thing. So I think there are 5 classes about it. All the classes they say that give HMG injections. That means we are not at all treating what we do for male infertility. Some sperm counts are low. What we are giving? We give some antioxidant. Random, and we don't know the composition of the antioxidant. We say we know only 1 or 2 ingredients in that, probably L-carnitine or CoQ, we know, but there are so many molecules in that. We don't generally look into the combination also. But that classification has come where with sir, he said that in any case of oligoasthenoteratome, you can give a shot of first HCG you give for 4 weeks and then give HMG for 4 weeks and then do the procedures. So In that way, you're doing something. You're increasing the FSH, you're increasing the LH. So you're doing something for the spermatogenesis. Antioxidants, you're not doing anything. DFA, yes.
Dosage and duration, ma'am.
HCG is 5000 I weekly once, okay? And HMG is 75, but he said that give at least 150. That's what the studies have been done with that dose. This is a very recent thing which I started doing. Because see, I also learn, we all learn, right? When I'm preparing for your talks, I learn a lot of things. That's how we educate, we increase our skills. It's not that I know everything from A to Z about infertility. No, it's a learning curve for everyone, even for me. Today I'm standing here and giving you a talk. Doesn't mean that I know everything. I also read a lot of papers, go through a lot of literature, see the evidence, and then I talk. So this is something which I started practicing now after, because I felt yes, true, decent enough. See, and what is the side effect of giving a HCG or FSF? Why HCG? Because it acts on LH. So nothing wrong. It might stimulate and increase the spermatogenesis. Logic enough. So then I understood, yes, there is a logic in this. If you're treating a sperm sample, why not give gonadotropins than dumping them with 3 types of antioxidants? So that's what I learned. So I'm telling my learning thing to you all guys. So where am I actually? So that's about history, where we are talking about the menstrual history and about the treatment. Previous treatment history is very, very important to plan your present cycle, right? So these are 2 things which I want to, apart from the male history and other history aspect. So someone said about the age. Yes, very, very important. So that's all. So this becomes a very primary duty for all our gynacs to educate. Now actually all of you might be heard about DINK, right? DINK. Yes, and now I have heard again, sir of PC sir, PC Mahamatra sir, talk. He said that now DINK with a dog. Yeah, he told me. It's all about pet parents now. They are like, now all are like, they want pet parents. We are a proud parent to our pet. They feel that pregnancy is a burden for them, the kids. It's a lot of responsibility. I have in my own family, my own cousins talking that, so see, first we'll try with the pet. If we can manage with the pet, then we will try. That's what the answer came for me. So that's practical scenarios which we are facing now. The average age patient coming and approaching you for pregnancy has increased. What I'm trying to say is that now, no, previously we used to get females at 20, 25, PCO. Mostly they used to come with PCO, anovulation. Periods, they're not getting proper cycles, so they want to conceive. That's the most common scenario we used to see earlier. Now, the average age patient walking to your clinic is 30. 30 minimum, in my experience, I'm talking about, these are all my practical experiences I'm talking about today, you know. So that means the average age patient coming to you has increased. So definitely, even though air replaces or technology improves, what's the results? We are at the same success rates. Why? Because the average age has increased. Okay, yeah, see, because why now? Minak is at 9, 10 years. Why? Anybody? Why? Exactly. There are a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals. I read a lot about this. I had one talk about it. See, whenever I like to give talks because it is a learning thing for me also. We go through a lot of literature and information about it. So endocrine disrupting chemicals, everywhere we have. In and around us we have all our endocrine disrupting chemicals. Among the most important thing is we all know is plastic. We have to, as I'm telling just now, IFS has started green IVF concept. we are starting an initiative of Green IVF. I am one of the member of that group. It's a national group where it's all about sustainability in IVF clinics. You all know a simple one IVF clinic generating how much of toxins and waste into the environment looks very silly or funny, but there will be no future generations if we are not working today. So as a doctors, as a professionals, because for a layman it's very difficult to understand sustainability or about future generations, why we are so worried about it and all. But as a professionals, we all should initiate, make our practices more sustainable. This is one message I want to give apart from the academic thing. Sustainable practice. How we can overcome, at least from our side, from small little contribution from our side, what we can do to make our practice more sustainable. So that's one important thing. As she said, exposure to the endocrine disruptors causing precocious puberty. Girls are getting menarche at 9-10 years. It's not healthy. So overexposure. Now kids are exposed overly to a lot of, we don't know a lot of things we reach till we reach 15-16 years. They know everything. Our children knows what is a menarche. We really don't know. They're prepared for it now actually. So this is how it is. So as I told you, again I got stuck. So the main intention of me telling all these things is the age of the patient who are coming to our clinics have increased. They're not coming early to the whatever, gynec or the IVF. IVF though, it's like we are 35 now. We have reached probably 30 to 35 bracket. So but like at least gynecs also. But that means you have to give the best in the first few cycles. What I'm trying, my intention of telling all these things is, you don't have a luxury of trying 12 ovulation inductions, 6 IUIs and all. See, at the time we have is, the precious time you have is 6 cycles. So let's all think about the first 6 cycles, how best we can give the success to that patient, right? So when you think about the evidence also, you see there are a lot of studies, always papers, they have different opinions and all, but you can always see that 30 years is a minimum, we can say that the success rates are much better, but above 30, the ages, the success rates, whatever it is, ovulation inductions or IUIs or IVF, the success rates will come down, and also more than 35 years, the IUI success rates are very, very low. It doesn't mean that they don't conceive with IUI, you have to know how many cycles you are trying. It's all about how much success rate, how much time. It's all about that, right? That's how you unlock your success to your treatments, right? And age of the male partner. We are least bothered. Wife is 25, husband 40. Don't look at the age of the male partner. We just only look at the semen report. But what happens in the advanced paternal age or male? Exactly, very good. So that's very important. DFA of the sperm, because they are exposed to a lot of toxins, oxidative stress, ROS and all. That doesn't come in the routine semen analysis which you are doing it. And when you observe, there is risk of miscarriage also in the male with more increased age, which we ignore. We always, when you think about RPL, which is one important, again, one more take-home message which I want to give is, RPL cases, we don't look at the male partner. So, better paternal age is also very important. So, DFA has become an added test now in a RPL category, which I do definitely agree. So, we have to look at the male sperm as well, right? So, that's about the cycles are hardly 10 to 15%. As the age increases, the success rates have come to as low as 3%, right? Next is the duration of infertility. We all know this, there is no much debate on that. Less duration of infertility, better success rate. So, average you can take it as 3 years. If they come before 3 years, you can take it at least minimum as 5 years. But above 5 years, the success rates will definitely come down. So, the conception rates come down as low as 10%, right? So the categories, patients which you select for IUI should be at least less than 35 years with good ovarian reserve, at least one patent tube with good tube ovarian dilation and short duration of infertility, less than 5 years. We are good till now. Now we know which cases we have to select for IUI, right? So, I want someone to volunteer. Okay, we're all about practicals only today. Okay, so 28-year-old female trying for pregnancy for 3 years, PCO, BMI is 23, HSG tubal test is good, semen analysis is normal. They tried several cycles with letrozole and now decided for IUI. What protocol you want to keep in this patient? What are the protocols you know about letrozole? One important, I think everywhere now it's all about letrozole protocols. Yes. See, one is we give regularly from day 2 to day 3. Okay, what's the maximum dose of letrozole we can give? 7.5 mg. It's not 5, you can go for thrice a day, max. Okay. So one is regular, day 2 to day 6. One is stage step, where you increase the letrozole protocol, 1 tablet, 2 tablets, 3, 4. That's how the dose is 10 tablets. Okay. And then the most famous now going on is the extended letrozole, where you are giving letrozole for continuously for 10 days. And the one interesting paper I have seen when I am preparing for this is giving 20 milligrams of letrozole once there is a dominant follicle. I felt this is slightly interesting. That means on day 5 or day 6, if a patient comes to you, you're already seeing a dominant follicle, you can give 20 milligrams of single dose of letrozole and see. I had to try, but this is something which we can. Because there is already a dominant follicle, this helps to increase the dominant follicle. That means there is no need to cancel the cycle as such patient is coming on day 5 or day 6. This is something I didn't try, but 20 milligrams straight dose I have not given, but this is something you can try. Okay, so there's something, okay, and they are decided for IUI. So this is something, this is the protocol that they have used. Can see? Okay, they given letrozole for 5 days and added gonadotropins for 3 days. Okay, and this is the day 10, day 11 scan. Okay, clear? Can you see all of you? So what do you want to do next? Going to give few more gonadotropins. How many follicles you can expect in this? It's almost like 14 or 2, 14, 3, 5, 13 or 2. So there are almost so many follicles which have recruited. So I am not going to continue any more gonadotropins here. You are definitely going to get 5 or 6 dominant follicles in this patient. Right? So I am going to definitely counsel the patient and cancel the cycle. Or what you can do, if you have an IVF center, you can definitely counsel them for an IVF cycle conversion. That too, but first cycle IUI, this happens very rare the patient accepts. But if it is a third or fourth cycle you are doing the IUI, you can definitely counsel the patient and convert them for IVF cycle, right?
So on day 7, follicle size was not seen.
Basically it is day 10, they have not have dominant follicle, that's why they are added gonadotropins there.
You can change at 7 only, day 7 only.
Which one? What you want to change? Because the dose given is only 75. Obviously, if there is no dominant follicle here at day 7, you will give gonadotropins. Sometimes, and you can see here it is only 14 ml on day 10. It's not that they have gone to 17 or 18. So here there is no dominant follicle or the size of the follicle is 7 or 8. You can think it as 8 ml follicle. So obviously you give 75. But here there is 13 ml. It's not that it has gone to 16 or 17 ml. That means recruited and more follicles have come. So obviously if you continue gonadotropin, obviously 13, 14 will definitely increase. See, basically the intention of telling this, taking this case scenario is you have to also see the number of follicles which are recruiting before just continuing with your gonadotropins. Right. So what's your aim of an ovarian stimulation? How many follicles you are aiming for?
2 to 3.
Yeah. So ideally the book says 2 to 3, but if you ask me, max 2, not more than that. Why? Because we don't want to give multiple pregnancies. Never. If you are giving multiple pregnancies, that means we are not a good fertility specialist. A lot of people think that twins एक बार हो गया तो हो गया. See, but it's not easy to give a there are a lot of pregnancy. I think obstetricians can enlighten about this, about a lot of complications, and obviously the patients who are coming for IVF are elderly also. It's also elderly pregnancies for us, high risk pregnancies, and multiple pregnancy added on. So it's not. So it's better, but not at least twins is fine. But you are not going to give triplets for sure, right? So these are the few options you have. You can proceed with IUI, add antagonist, which we are not going to do in this case, or cancel IUI, which I am going to do in this case, and ask abstinence from intercourse. I'll tell you one interesting case which I have in my personal practice. So same like this, she's a young PCO. BMI 23 is normal, right? PCO is something which are very tricky. Right? You don't know how they respond. Suddenly, as she said, now Rekha is saying that what's the size at that side. So it might be small, but suddenly they respond. You never know. You might not see a recruiting follicle at that stage, but suddenly you get hyperstimulation. I had experience like that in my case. So one case I'm going to discuss. One case I'm stimulating. So very poor response. I have given HMG 175. No response. I generally don't go with 150 in my practice. Very rare I give 150. Patient, very anxious patient, want pregnancy at any cost. So I have given almost 6 injections of 75. No response. Then what I did, I added 150. Okay. I have given only, I think, 3 injections of 150. I got 2 follicles. Okay. 2 or 3 follicles. I have not given HCG trigger. Obviously, in IUIs we don't give agonist triggers. Why? Why? Anybody? Why? Why you give only HCG triggers in IUI? Or you can give agonist?
Luteal.
Obviously, yes, agonist, short luteal phase. The luteolysis will happen early. There won't be proper luteal phase support. HCG can support the luteal phase much better. See, in IUIs, we want pregnancies in that cycles only. When we are giving agonist, we are going to freeze the embryos or we are not transferring in that cycle. So, obviously, we give HCG. So, what happened? This is for IUI, the patient which I am talking about. I have given HCG, called for her after IUI. I have seen 6 follicles. When I am giving trigger, I have not seen. I have seen only 2 follicles. So, follicles can respond even after HCG, which I learned one thing. So then what I said, I cancelled the cycle. Okay, I said abstinence, this, that, I cancelled the cycle. So again patient came on the second day in the next cycle. Again started with letrozole. Again the same thing, no response. Again I have increased. Again I got 2 follicles. Again I gave trigger. On the day of IUI, again I have seen multiple follicles. So again I asked her to cancel the cycle. Patients are very smart. Endometrium is very good. I told them when I gave the trigger that this month it's going to work out for you like anything. Endometrium is excellent. Response is very good. It's going to work 200% this time. That's what the assurance. I'm very damn sure because I felt, see for me if I see the endometrium like a flower, I'm so happy. You know my excitement goes up. They don't know why I'm so excited, but I know why I'm excited. Endometrium I feel is so important. So I got so excited and said, so I cancelled the cycle. Patients are very smart. He is so disappointed. They had normal intercourse. I told them abstinence. So what happens? And they had normal intercourse. I told all the precautions and all. I don't know that they had intercourse and all. So then what happened? They are traveling to Hajj. Hajj or some pilgrimage. So he called me from the airport and saying that she has bloating. In the airport, in the flight. Literally, as a consultant, how you will feel. And obviously, to be frank, we are not that much with the emergencies. We are so used to going to the clinic and you got suddenly a call in the window that she is having bloating in that too in the airport. Then I said, see, I told you not to try. You tried. That's fine. Then how can you travel at this point? Then he said that no, it's a spiritual journey. We can't cancel. He's very damn, like strong-minded guy. I still remember he brings the baby to me every time, and now he's coming for the second time. I'm so very just leave. So he's now coming for the second conception. So that's how again it reminded of the whole story. So then what happened? So he's on the journey. Then I said, see, it might be a hyperstimulation. She might be having some anxieties or something. I don't know. You're describing like that, and he said that there's some rash on the abdomen or something and all. And I said that, see, they are going to Dubai from there. I said, no, you have to go to the doctor in Dubai. Please don't take her. And she's very young lady, very beautiful. I still remember she's coming in second, but she's very like she listens to whatever husband says. She's something like that. I said that no, you have to take her. Then he got down in Dubai and he took her. Luckily, he took her to the hospital. Then what happened? The doctor there diagnosed her with ectopic. And that guy is so smart. She said she just missed her period. How can we be ectopic, madam? They are saying they're seeing the sac in the tube and all. He's such a smart guy. I said she just, and they had done the beta LCG. It is around probably 400 or something. He said with 400, how come ectopic and rupture and all? They're saying rapid and all. It's a night time. Some duty doctor said. I said no. You talk to the consultant tomorrow. Then they have talked to the consultant the next day. They have done the beta HCGs and they have evaluated and she's fine. They started her with heparin and all. She went the yatra and came back and delivered also. But you never know. Stimulations you can't ignore if you are writing a prescription. Whatever it is, monitoring is very, very important. We generally, it can happen to anybody, anytime, luckily, and babies, they nicely delivered and again he's coming back, but I was like, see, this time you have to listen to me. This is for a simple IVF, this whole story has happened, okay? There's a lot of drama and everything is like a movie story. If I tell it will take a lot of time, but briefly it is something like this. So what I'm trying to say is when you see more follicles, it is better to stop, but it's very important to tell the patients what to do, what not to do also. Because patients are very smart. And once you say that it's very good, they are going to YT as well, whether you are equipped to convert it into an IVF cycle or not. You should always discuss the pros and cons and also the cost implications. As I told you, the risk of OHSS. Now, as we are discussing now, mostly we are doing all frozen cycles. But now again the trend is going back to the 90s. First, how IVF started. So now everyone is saying to do our fresh transfers. They say that the results are much better. Previously, we used to all do the long protocols. Now a long protocol has come back. So because the endometrium is much better in the long protocols. So they are insisting now, a lot of papers have come up where we are saying to do long protocols, do fresh transfers. So that's how it is. So I, in my touchwood, in my practice, I had only 2 cases of OHSS. One went for tapping, one managed medically. So otherwise, mostly we are doing frozen cycles. Now also I have to think back how I can, now we, as I told you about sustainability in IVF, green IVF, the concept is to do more fresh transfers. Why? Because I think the embryology team can enlighten how liquid nitrogen is made. Embryology team. So how much pollution we are giving into the environment by making the liquid nitrogen containers and the plants and all. There is a big topic about liquid nitrogen and how much toxins it is releasing into the environment. We all don't know, we are least bothered about all these things. We are just sitting, but that's not going to work that way. Today we are here, I am just so I just want to take this message. Everyone should take an initiative. It's not like a one-man job here. I'm standing here and saying, but you all should think about sustainability and for your future generations. Otherwise, as I told you, just we are talking about after 100 years, probably there is no life on Earth. We have to move to some other planet, probably, looking for oxygen and all. Right? That's how it is. So sustainability is everything we should incorporate in your practice. So that comes as the concept of fresh transfers now. So freezing we have to come down. Cryoprotectants are hazardous. So there are a lot of toxins which are going from the IVF lab. So I'm also slowly starting it because I also do most of them are frozen cycles because we are used to them. But now slowly I'm starting it. I will tell my experience probably if I get a chance later. How I probably 1 year study about how my experience about fresh and frozen cycles. Okay, so that's about it. Where am I? Okay, so that's about risk of OHSS. So once you are seeing more follicles and you are not sure about whether she will land up with OHSS or not, what one investigation you can do? Estradiol, right? Serum estradiol. It will tell you about how many dominant follicles you are getting. So if it is more than 1000, it is better not to go ahead with the triggering. Okay. And also it is very important to see the small size follicles. We generally only our aim when we do a scan, what is a dominant follicle? We just see the size and come back. And a lot of people take only one measurement. They are not bothered to take two measurements also. I've seen a lot of people, just take this, okay, done. It's no need to do at least Doppler, but at least do a proper evaluation on the follicular study, what you are doing, and always look for the smaller follicles. That means 13, 14 mm follicles are very, very important. If you are seeing more of 13, 14 mm follicles, you please do a serum estradiol level before triggering. It gives you a lot of information. That's how you learn. You learn when you practice. You learn. There is no need to do in every cycle. But first, if you have it out, why not doing in one cycle? Holding a trigger for one day doesn't harm anything. Right? So that's how you do it. So do a serum estradiol levels and then plan your trigger. So obviously, before discharge, you are not going to go ahead with a IUI or anything in this case. So what advice you give for a patient who had a slight mild OHSS? You obviously tell them abstinence, all these things. What are the new drugs which have come now? OHSS. A patient has come. You have stimulated. Normal patient. Multiple follicles developed. How do you counsel them? You're going to cancel that cycle. What are the precautions you tell to the patient? Not IUI, not IVF. Simple ovulation induction. Do happens, right? Once you are giving gonadotropins, in left and right we give gonadotropins in our practice. I've seen normal cycles giving 225 also gonadotropin some doctors. So when you're giving that much of high doses, there is a very high risk of OHSS, right? So what are the precautions you are going to tell the patient? Very important. Yes, exactly. Very good, madam. So we are going to talk about abstinence. You are going to talk about the warning signs and symptoms about OHSS. That might be bloating, distension, mild pain, and in severe cases you have oliguria and all these things, right? So, and what are the drugs we have to treat? One is analgesics, antiemetics and all. Specifically, we can reduce the risk of OHSS. One is now, I think the new kid on the block is letrozole. Lot of people don't, why again you are giving letrozole? Why we are giving letrozole in the luteal phase to reduce OHSS, anybody? Anti-estrogenic. It reduces the estrogen level. So you are having a case of OHSS, you can give letrozole. One thing. Another thing is antagonist. If you are having a facility of having an antagonist, you can definitely give antagonist, and cabergoline, which we are giving since long time, it reduces the GF factor and all. Again, one more interesting case I want to tell. It's all about, see, you guys, if you have any personal experiences also, do share, so that that's how we learn from each other. You tell your experiences so that we will know how to deal in that scenario. So again, one more example. One of my friend, she, very young patient again, PCO patient, stimulated. It went into hyperstimulation. So she sent to me for a second opinion. It is a normal case of ovulation induction. Nothing, no IUI, no IUI. Very simple, newly married, might be for 1 year. So she had landed up in hyperstimulation. So she sent the case to me for a second opinion. So I have seen the case. So there are a lot of multiple follicles which are there. Then obviously, as I spoke with you today, so I gave my opinion and patient went back to that doctor. So she is managing the case. She kept on whatever drugs and all, and she asked for her to come for scan regularly. So we don't know, they might have had intercourse. So what happened? The patient ended up in an emergency in some other hospital. What might have happened? Exactly. You're going to get a gift for me, ma'am. Definitely. See, you're going to definitely, please have to give gift to her. Okay. So, we ignore torsion. We only think about OHSS means distension, pain. If you are not having distension, you are fine. Distension doesn't happen with your ovulation inductions in your clinic. The amount of drug you are giving or the amount of gonadotropin you are giving, it might happen, but very rare cases they land up with severe or moderate OHSS. You shouldn't be worried about that. You should be, but your main intention should be a torsion. Why? Bulky ovary folds on itself and become torsion, especially if they had intercourse. There is a very high risk of torsion. And that patient landed up in torsion and had a oophorectomy elsewhere, and they came to that friend of mine and did a big hangama. Young age, losing one ovary is not an easy thing. So we have to be very careful. Explain about the risk of torsion. My take home one more point message today is you should never ignore torsion. And especially if the patient is complaining of pain. Pain is something which we shouldn't ignore. Whatever it is, I say if patient says, because I know how dysmenorrhea will be, I never ignore a patient of dysmenorrhea. You can never, as we are talking about quality of life, as doctors we are here to give quality of life to the patients. We are not here to just diagnose, treat and send them. Ultimately, it's the quality of life. If you give good quality of life, the patient will remember you for eternally, probably lifetime of us. So pain is something in whatever, endometrial, anywhere, pain is one symptom which I learned in my practice of 10 years of IVF is something. One point is pain. If patient is complaining of pain or it is increasing in tendency, that means there is some pathology which is happening. At least rule out. You might not be having or something, but rule out that pathology what it is. That's what I learned. So all know if there are severe signs and symptoms, right? So then what happened? This patient, as I said, we have cancelled the cycle, right, ma'am? So we have cancelled Dr. Jyoti ma'am, right? So then what happened? Next cycle she has come again for IUI. So she had only one follicle. I am happy. 18 into 1, 16 into 1. I am happy, right? Now we have given HCG. Good to go. Good proper stimulation. Then what happened? Generally, as we have already discussed about this point, what number of follicles gives the better success rate. If you ask me, 2 to 3 is the thing which we are looking for. For me, it is 2. Okay? So, higher pregnancy rate with 2 to 3 pre-ovulatory follicles. So, again there is a discussion about size. Lot of discussion. When to trigger. $1 million question. Lot of people say. There are so many studies which have said that if you are giving gonadotropins, you can go as early as 16 mm. In IVF cycles also, we are aspirating a 16 follicles, we are getting M2s. Right? But if you are giving oral, then the maximum we can go is 20. Okay? This is something which we all know. Okay? And as I told you, endometrium is also a very important key thing which we have to look for. There are no much pregnancies is on IUI if the endometrium is less than 6 mm. There are a lot of papers about how thin is thin endometrium. How thin is thin? Less than? Huh? Depends on? Phase of the cycle, fine. Thickness I am talking about, okay. What phase? After proliferation you have secretory changes, but thickness doesn't. See, I am asking, okay, I will be more specific. What is the endometrium when you call it thin at the time of trigger, probably? That might be a correct question. 5. How many of you got pregnancies at 5 mm? That's what. 5 is good? No. Cut off. What we are looking for? Minimum is 7. 7. 6 is good. Okay, you see some pregnancies. I don't deny that you don't see pregnancies. But any stimulation which you are giving, the minimum I am looking for or you are looking for is 7 mm. Okay? Minimum cutoff we are taking is 7. Right? So that's how it is. So what happens? Ma'am, I am going to talk this case to you only. Now, IUI we are planning. Husband has come. He didn't give the sperm. Come on, embryology people. Department. Right? What to do? How to do? Okay, you're going to answer. Rajendra, come on. Yes, exactly, ma'am. One more gift to ma'am. I'm expecting some unique answers which I'm getting. I'm very happy for that. Yes, because we all think about sildenafil first. We all think about giving some sildenafil and sending him again to give the sample. That's not going to work. Why? Erection is a psychological thing. It's all about, what is this? Mastermind controlling. You are not going to control it. It's not in your hand, doctor hands. It's in the mastermind's hand, which is hypothalamus. Endocrinology, very important. I still read endocrinology every day. Still I find something, one extra point which I don't know. Very, very important is endocrinology. Right? So mastermind is here. So you have to make him relax. As ma'am said, privacy. Very, very important. You can't send the man into a washroom and ask him to collect the sample. It's not going to work that way. Whoever are doing IUI or want to do an IUI, a proper semen collection room is a must. Right? So it's very important to have a... So basically, he failed to produce semen. Follicle ruptured. So what you are going to do? One is, as said, there are two things how to tackle this situation. There are two things. One is one is prevention and another thing is solution. So how to prevent the situation and how to solve if you have landed up in that situation. Right? There are two aspects of it. Right? So prevention is, as discussed, most important thing is to have privacy. So counsel them, make them comfortable, make them relax. Okay, the couch should be comfortable. You can send the partner if necessary. Washing facility, very important. Very, very important. Washing facility. A lot of people can't give a sperm if they don't have a proper washing facility. These are practical issues which we all should learn about. And obviously, if you are cancelling the cycle because the husband couldn't give the sperm, you should obviously freeze the sample, one backup sample for the next IUI. So these are all preventing things. What are the solutions? Very important. This is all we know. Synlash with less side effects. Vibro, ejaculator, coitus interruptus, condoms, non-toxic. Home collection we don't generally advise, but in our center, if it is really difficult for the patient, we take a written consent that they're collecting and bringing the sample from the home. Consent is very, very important. If you don't take the consent later, you don't know whose sperm he brought, and if you are doing, he can against you. So very, very important to take a proper consultation once they are giving home sample is the least thing we encourage at Mom IVF, but sometimes one or two patients, sometimes we take a proper consent, written consent from both the partners and then take the sample. Very, very important. Right? So semen collection problem is not a uncommon thing. It's not a rarest thing. We do come across these things. We should know how to prevent it and tackle the situation, and you should able to get a solution for it, right? So 8.3% of men experience ejaculation failure on the day of operation for IRT. So mostly in IVF we all know and we keep a backup. IUI is a concern. So one cycle you have that experience, you definitely keep a backup sample for the next cycle, right? So only 59% of men attending the fertility clinic felt comfortable in masturbation, and 48% required external stimulation to collect semen. It can be a partner or ejaculator, anything, right? So we are just done with one case scenario. Hope you are all there with me. Not exhausted, not bored. No? Yes? Okay. Off late, I think Rekha left. I think now my son is giving boards, CBSE boards. Now I'm also attending online classes with him. There is one guy called Prashant Kirad. I don't know how many of you guys have 10th class or not. He is always asked, how is the Josh meter in between? So I also have to ask, how is the Josh meter? So it's 100%, 80% depending on that. I will cut down my talk or go ahead with my talk, right? So the case scenario 2, here is a male person, Mr. PS, without any significant history. So this is the semen analysis. How is the sample?
Oligo and acid.
Sample. I have a lot of cases to discuss. Oligo. What is oligospermia? Number is less. Good. Astheno? Terito? Morphology. What is the normal morphology we are looking for? 4%. So oligo, astheno, terito. Okay. Is this sample good for IUI? Is my next question. It's okay. We all know that it's oligo, astheno, terito.
Has to be 5 million. It is this 2 million.
Exactly, very good. See, generally what we see is only 10 million, good to go. It's not that we are not going to do IUI, even though the motility is less, but at least it is helpful to counsel the patient. If the total motile count of the sperm before processing IUI itself is less, you are not going to get better success rates, even though you are washing the sample, doing whatever procedure you are doing in the workshop here, but still the success rates are not very good. So, proper reading of the semen report is very, 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 very important, right? Okay? So, what are the options? Donor sperm, antioxidants for 6 months, which we have discussed. Then review who will come after 6 months if you give antioxidants, no one. Detailed evaluation, IVF ICSI with cell sperms, right? So severe male factor, if not left untreated, there will be progressive decline in the sperm parameters. So this is one nice interesting study in the urology paper where they have seen that untreated or unintervened samples of oligoasthenotereto, 24%, this is about 65 patients, where 16 patients with severe oligo developed into azo, 2 patients with moderate became azo, none of the patients with mild oligo developed azoospermia. That means severe cases of OATS can lead to azoospermia in the future. So here comes again the option of fertility preservation. It's very important. As a doctor, even though they want to go ahead or don't want to go ahead, but as a doctor, as a professional, you have to definitely give the option of fertility preservation. And sperm, it is very easy. Egg, there is a lot of process. They have to go for stimulation, pick up, there is that. But sperm, at least they can, even though you're going to try with him for medications, oral or IUIs, at least give them the option. At least tell them the option that this is an option available for you to freeze the sperm, and you have the data here. That in future you may land up with azoospermia. You can keep this paper and also tell one more take home point. Right? Fertility preservation. At your level, at the gynec level, if you start motivating the patient, you are doing lot of help to the patients to get pregnancies with their own gametes. No one wants a donor. No one. I will tell the last option as a donor. If nothing is working out with me, touchwood, my patients are very patient with me. They are there for me with years also if they need it. But they understand, as I am discussing with you, like this only I discuss the patient. Tell about 5-10% success rate in IVF cycle. Also patient go with me, which I feel is a blessing for me. But it's about counseling them and giving them proper information. Decision is obviously the patient, but you have to give a proper information. So fertility preservation is something you all need to discuss with the couples if they want to delay their pregnancy for some other reason, or they want to try other methods before. Just freeze the sperm, that's it. Right? At least male, it is a very easy process which they can go ahead with. Right? So that's how, and as I told you, it's about total motile sperm count is a better indicator for the severity of male factor infertility than the WHO classification, where we are only looking at the count mostly. So motile sperm count is something which is very important parameter which you have to look for. Okay? So as I told, that's about it. No, right? This is about the per cycle pregnancy rates. The counts are 10 to 20 million, it's about 18%. If the count is, as we are taking about the cutoff of 5 million, as Dr. Mansa discussed, the success rates are as low as 2.7%. Right? This is how you go about the pre-wash. This is all about pre-wash. The post-wash motile sperm count, they have told is minimum is 1 million actually, but we have not seen pregnancies with post-wash 1 million. The minimum thing which we can look for is 5 million. Post-wash also. Right? So if the total motile sperm count is less than 5 million, it is always better to go ahead with IVF cycles or ICSI cycles which have a better success rates, right? And if you have a low motile or low volume sample, you can always ask for a double ejaculate. Okay, that is one technique which can always consider. You can ask them to, at a gap of half an hour, you can ask them to give one more sample. You can pool the sample and increase at least the count and motility and inseminate. That is something which you can think of as a solution or as an option. Okay, double ejaculate often produces better quality of sperm. There are so many papers which justify it. So, in pooled samples also you can try. So, there is sperm counts are low. Max cycles of IUI you can try are, if you ask me, I think 4. 4 is decent. 3 is okay. 3 is very good. Someone is stopping at 3, I really admire. But 4 is decent. 6 is, I feel, it's too much. I've seen some people trying 12 cycles, 10 cycles, just like a normal routine. But it's not, if it's not working, the best success rates are there in the first 3 cycles. But 4th cycle, I do try in some cases where I feel everything is very good, but still it's not working out. What I do? I do a total recombinant cycle, same like an IVF cycle. But I go with as low as 37.5. I've gone to 25 units also, if the very thin BMI. But I do, my last cycle is always a total rec FSS cycle with as low as 37.5. I'll get only 1 egg with that. Very rarely I get 2 eggs, but the results are very good because I get a very good endometrium also when I give a recombinant FSH, right? That's how I put it, right? So my 3. Basically, case of severe dysmenorrhea, AMH is good, 5 cm endometrioma and right ovary, 7 analysis normal. What do you want to do?
But they have to counsel them properly regarding the patients.
Yes, counseled. What do you want? You want to go? See, 2 options. Want to go for surgery or not? First question. You want to go for surgery. Okay. Then what do you want to do? Yes, we have done. What are the 2 main complications of endometriosis surgery? Very good. Second, anybody says the second, you are going to get 1 more prize. No. Anybody answering this? 1 more gift from my side. Decreased reserve, everybody is going to tell, I know. No. Who said recurrence? The main important thing which we are going to counsel is about tell them. We only tell them that the egg reserve is going to come down, AMH might come down. Recurrence is something which we need to discuss, right? So that's about it, about the endometriotic surgery. See, to operate it, here the image is very good, so we can definitely take a chance for laparoscopy in this patient, and she's just married for 2 years. They won't be definitely ready for IVF, obviously. So it is, image is good, young patient, married for 2 years, 5 centimeters, unilateral endometrioma. Mostly the prognosis will be much better with laparoscopy. You're going to do laparoscopy and offer her IUI. So what is the role? Is there a lot of people? Endometriosis, IVF. Anybody who see endometriosis, mostly they say they land up with IVF. No, it's not like that. They are also, I think ISHRE guidelines are also recently have been come where they have clearly said that in stage 1 and 2 endometriosis, IUI has a very significant role and the results are good with IUI in stage 1 and 2 endometriosis, and also laparoscopy can also be advised in these cases, okay? And we have one nice this thing which has come up, I think you might be, during surgery we have one form, endometriosis fertility index. That's a very good form. You can fill that during the time of surgery. It will give you, guide you which form of treatment you can go later after surgery. Very good, nice form. It tells you about the tubal pathology, tubal findings, how are the tubes, how is the POD, everything. So it gives you a very, I feel very nice. That form is very nice to plan the next course of indications for IUI. Why? Yes, and another thing is mostly endometriosis is mostly associated with adenomyosis. What is endometriosis? It is a inflammatory condition. Wherever there is inflammation, there is adenomyosis also which has come into play. Again, somehow gets random things in my brain to discuss. I have given a talk recently in ISAR on what? Probiotics. What they have given, one theory for endometriosis, very interesting I felt, is change in the uterine microbiota. So, if you are not keeping your vaginal and endometrial microbiota, obviously there is an invasion of the pathogens. There is chronic endometritis. This is also one of the reasons for developing endometriosis. That's right, interesting theory. So, when I gave a talk about probiotics, what I understood is probiotics can cure cancer also. What I understood, very important is to have a healthy microbiota, which we all ignore in our own health also. Now, how many of us are having gut problems? Lot of people are having gut issues now. We are not able to eat. Irritable bowel syndrome has increased in incidence. So it's very important to have a healthy gut microbiome. Gut is most in reproduction also. Once I read about microbiota and probiotics, my what laddu futta, that ad will come what that dairy milk, that shots or something. Laddu futta brain mein laddu. That's how my brain blasted, like what, this much is there for microbiota. Why we are all talking about microbiota? Now we have, I think, like how we are doing receptivity array, we are doing microbiota array now. We are studying about the uterine microbiome. In cases of recurrent implantation failure, we are studying about uterine microbiome and then replacing them with that probiotics to increase the implantation. There's a new research which is happening, which I felt very interesting. Probably if I have a chance, I asked my people to do what? In cement to see the microbiota. I tell so many things, the thing should come from that. So I told them there is a sperm with lactobacilli dominant is more fertile when compared to non-lactobacilli. So we can do a nice study about it to see the male, because we get a lot of sperm samples in and there. So to study it, I told my team, but I don't know how far they have come for that. So that's one interesting study I want to do in future to see about the microbiota and male fertility, male sperm. So where I went to microbiota, I don't know. Endometriosis, reason. So that is one thing. So gut, all of us to keep our guts very safe. It's for us also. Gut plays a very important role. Inflammation plays a very important role. Cancer we all know, because vaginal microbiota damage, HPV infection, cervical cancer, we're doing so many programs about awareness of cervical cancer. So it's very important to maintain that vaginal microflora, and it's the important thing, right? So the human reproduction says do not recommend IUI in endometriosis. There are so many agreements and disagreements, but definitely stage 1 and 2 in endometriosis you can definitely try IUI. So then on the day of IUI, husband collected sperm, previous semen analysis is normal in this patient, Jyoti ma'am, again. Today we got only 4 to 5 motile sperms. How to deal this situation? Anybody? How to deal? Normal analysis. I think give the mic to our younger embryologist there. Not the senior, youngs. Jahnavi, where are you? Okay. So, we are planning IUI. I have sent this person for semen. I have sent the patient to collect the sample. Jahnavi, take the mic. Okay. So, I have sent you for IUI. Patient came to you. His previous report, you have only analyzed it. You have done a semen analysis. When the patient came, normal. He has given the sample today, 4 to 5 motile sperms. How to deal in this situation?
Only 4 days.
Huh?
Only 4 to 5 months.
Yes.
Same color, multiple samples.
Multiple. How many? How many he will give? A person. What do you think? Giving a sample is such a easy thing. Give multiple. How many? You give 10 samples. We will collect and pull the sample and do. It's not easy. Okay. But the thing is correct. You can ask for one more sample. That the intention is correct, but not multiple. Okay. So, what might have happened? Yes. The most common thing is spillage, and patient doesn't tell you that. I will definitely ask if I get a low volume in your analysis also. Once you get a normal sperm count, and then if you see the volume 0.5 ml, I will definitely ask the patient whether you have spilled the sample. Most common thing. They don't understand how to collect the sample first. So first they spill and they collect the remaining last portion. So that's how it happens. So it's very important that they might have spilled the sample. So basically, the first report might not be correct. It might be that one reason. You should always think about it. You should think all permutations and combinations. If my brain works 10 times, I will think 10 options. This might have happened, this might have happened, and then come to a conclusion. That's how my brain works when I deal a situation. So your lab might not have given a proper report, or embryology variation will be there. Now we are all came to A-based analysis. Now we are not dependent on the person as such now. I don't know, future now they are saying robo-XCs. So robo will do the XC. You install a robo and that robo will do all the XC. So that's the future of the IVF lab, right? You have heard about robo-XC? Right? Robots doing ICSI now, robots are doing laparoscopies. Why not ICSI? It is even much easier than doing laparoscopy, right? So that's how it is. So it can be a intra-individual variability. Might be the patient might have suffered with some infections, right? Might be some new insult to spermatogenesis. So you have to think these many things when you're getting one sample report. Or inadequate testicular stimulation, or it can be some spillage as we have discussed, right? So it's very important to look for this, right? Then as she mentioned, you can ask for one more sample. Ask for double ejaculate. We can't ask multiple because it's a very exhausting thing to give a sample. It's not a pleasure thing to give a sample in a lab. For a man, we have to understand that. So it can be a double ejaculate, right? The solution is taking one more sample. So I'm not going to theory aspect of this. You can all read it. The sperm count is less. You can go for ICSI and all. So I'm not going to detail. Anyhow, they are going to discuss about the sperm preparation process. My team will be discussing it and make you do hands-on today. I feel all of you should try hands-on IUI. Don't just listen to the theory and go. It should be your own experience of how you can prepare a sample. Then you really understand. If your technician is preparing also, you know what's going wrong and why your cycles are not working. You're not getting proper IUI success rate. You should know what's going on wrong, right? If you know the process, then only you will know. I advise all of you to please stay back for the hands-on workshop. So it depends on the method. Method mostly we use this density gradient. I'm not going into the laboratory aspect of it. Now we have the microfluids as well to get a better sperm sample. Insemination, we all know I do only single IUI. Very rarely I do double IUI. It's mostly I give trigger 36 hours later we do an IUI. If you are doing double IUI, it is 24 hours and 48 hours. The next question, most important question is whether I have to do IUI if there is ovulation only is a question. That's what we are interested in. We are not interested in this. We all know this. Right? So yes or no? Yes? You confirm ovulation and do? If there is no ovulation, patient has come to you. Will you go ahead with IUI or not? Simple. Yes. And again, embryology team. Processed sperm can survive in the vaginal tract for how much year? Actually, processed sperm can survive in the vaginal tract for only 24 hours. Another take home. It's not that intercourse, when you have normal intercourse, that is a different scenario. But once you are processing the sperm, it's not going to have that much capacity. It's only for 24 hours, but that's going to cover that period. But I want to tell you that processed sperm is different from a normal intercourse sperm. Right? So that's what I want to tell. So where am I? Yeah, yes. So you can go ahead with insemination even though there is no ovulation, but it is always good practice to confirm ovulation and do. I do confirm ovulation and do. Sometimes I repeat the trigger.
One query actually. Before doing IUI, if you do the BVS scan, I heard the gel will contain the spermicidal.
We won't keep on the above, right? We only keep in below the condom.
Okay, not above.
See, we are not keeping above.
Okay.
So, obviously, you need that gel for lubrication for the resolution to come, but you are not keeping above. Generally, what do? You keep the gel, keep the condom, again keep the gel on the. So, you are not going to use the above gel.
Okay.
You can use the probe cover, no? Right?
No. In the probe cover, you keep. Sometimes you keep above also. Generally, we don't use that. You use no. If it is very tight, then use normal saline for the easy penetration.
So if it is not ruptured after 36 hours, after how many hours will you repeat the scan for the confirmation of the ovulation?
See, basically, as I told you, you can go ahead with IUI first thing. But what I do in my practice, I give a agonist trigger in those cases. There I feel agonist works. Because why? Agonist gives a flare effect. The terminology is flare effect. So there is a sudden increase in the FSH and LH. So ovulation mostly happens with agonist. If I am giving HCG, there is no ovulation. Generally, I give agonist, wait them in the clinic for 2 hours. I just confirm whether they have ovulated or not and then do IUI. Or if they have not ovulated, I do the IUI, send them. And ask them to have normal intercourse. One more important take-home point is to have intercourse on the day of IUI. Basically, to be frank, increases the success rates of IUI. Generally, what they think is IUI, they have to go for bed rest. A lot of patients think that we have done a big procedure and they shouldn't have. But intercourse on the day of IUI improves the success rates of IUI. But if I feel that there is no ovulation and I have done IUI, I definitely ask them to try to have a normal intercourse if the sperm is very good. It's not going to work if the sperm is very bad, that's fine. So that's how it is. Or you can also call for a double IUI. Next day also you can ask them and inseminate, but I don't do that in my practice. But practically it makes sense to confirm ovulation. But if the patient is very near, I definitely ask them to come next day to confirm at least ovulation. See, for us to understand, see if this cycle is not going to work, what you are going to next cycle is, I always plan the next cycle. That's how my brain works. I don't know. I'm for the next cycle. If this is not working out, what's my plan for the next cycle? How I am prepared for the next cycle is how my system works. So the fourth is like PCO not respond to letrozole and CC, underwent LOD, tubes patent, partner semi-normal, request for IUI. As I told you, this is how I go with my total recombinant cycle. But here it is a taken case from some other place. But as I go with as low as 37.5. As I told you, 75 I never start with. You go because recombinant you have a advantage of taking as low as 37.5 units. So you won't go into hyperstimulation if you go with total recombinant cycles also. Hardly you will get one follicle, which is very good. The second thing is another practical question. 16 mm, you have not given trigger, follicle rupture. Will you do IUI or not? We can do when you are giving a recombinant cycle. There is a maturity as early as 15-16 mm. There is no need to cancel the cycle after giving so much of gonadotropins. You can go ahead with IUI. Trigger is definitely not a must thing. But if you are triggering, you can plan properly. Okay? So sometimes if I am getting a single follicle not good, we convert the IVF cycle to IUI also. These situations can also, very poor ovarian reserve patients, it can happen. Prevention of premature ovulation. We all know antagonist is the new kid on the block where we are adding antagonist. How do you diagnose premature ovarian? Premature LH surge is the question. It's not about the solution. We know the solution. How to identify premature LH surge? You won't do LH kits for everybody, right? Yeah, you do. One of the method is LH kits. How do you suspect or good. Generally, if you are seeing a follicle, 14 mm, 15 mm, you call them for our next day scan or alternative. You are not seeing the follicle. That's how you identify, right? Rupture of the follicle before attaining maturity, not trigger. Sometimes it may naturally ovulate also. That's how it is, right? Before attaining maturity, only the follicle is rupturing. The name itself premature. The follicle is not mature enough. Still, it has ovulated. That is premature LH surge. That is very important. Why? Because it is repeating sometimes. Cycles. In these cases, there is a role of antagonist. We do have a role of antagonist in IUI cycles. These are the cases where you can add antagonist. Mostly this happens in elderly age women. Mostly you see this type of scenarios in advanced maternal age, right? So basically, but there are so many studies which say that antagonist is useful, not useful. But for me, in my practice, premature LH surge is identified. You can give antagonist, and advanced maternal age also you can add antagonist to improve your success rates in your IVF cycles. Okay. So the next is like Mrs. Sesson undergoing IUI for unexplained subfertility, satisfactory stimulation response, no significant medical. So catheters. What catheters do you want to use in your IUIs? See, basically any catheter doesn't affect your success rates in IUI cycles. You can use what type of catheter you are comfortable with. That doesn't matter. Catheter should not be negotiated. That means it shouldn't be a difficult insemination. That is the motto. If it is a difficult insemination, how to deal with it? Mostly 20% of the cases can be difficult. You can use hard catheter in this. You shouldn't get ultimately blood at the tip of the catheter. Shouldn't be there. So if it is there, you can, what are the interventions you can do? One is ultrasound guided. The most important take home point is ultrasound guided. You have a difficult insemination, do it under ultrasound guidance. Most important thing. Okay, and also you can give slight traction on the cervix. It doesn't hamper your success rates. But don't poke and then do. If you're feeling that the negotiation is difficult or the catheter is, you're not able to negotiate it, you can still hold with the Alice. But don't try multiple attempts and then hold Alice. Then it will be unbearable for the woman. So just don't take the decision slightly early. If you use tinaculum also, the results doesn't hamper. Ultrasound is best to do with IUI. So this is how you do ultrasound guidance. If you have a difficulty, you can do mock. Obviously, hysteroscopy is the option if you have a very severe cervical stenosis. This is very nice, interesting paper about seasons and IUI success rates, where Spring group had highest success rates, which I felt very interesting. And low AMH, one question, will you do IUI or not? Yes, you can do. But the most important thing which you look for is age. Young age, low AMH, yes, you can do IUI. Older age, low AMH, no IUI. Right? So quality control of your lab is also very important. You have to look for the QC, QF, the labs are very, very important, which I am not going to do. It's a very big chapter on itself. So the key to success of your IUI is check the ovarian reserve of the patient, tubal patency check, sperm analysis, optimize your ovarian stimulation, proper semen preparation, catheter, ultrasound guided, plan single or double, slow release of sperm, see that there is no backflow, and this is how you get good results in selection of patient is very important. Young, optimal ovarian reserve, mild oligoastheno, patent tubes, no or minimal pelvic pathology. Refer to an IVF specialist if the age is more than 35. That's what we learned today. Reduced ovarian reserve, young age, low MH, you can try. Older age, low MH, don't try. 4 failed IVFs, what we have learned to do is 4 cycles today. Severe male factor, no IUI. Extensive endometriosis, we have learned, no IUI. And wherever you need a cryopreservation of the sperms. So it's very important to carefully select the couples. Maximum is for me 3 to 4 cycles. As I told you, reproductive endocrinology. All of you should go back and read Spiroff. Very, very important. Especially if there are PGs here, please read Spiroff. It's very good. Physiology of control ovarian stimulation. Use of gonadotropin in IUI, but avoid multiple pregnancies and OHSs. Well-timed single IUI is the best. Avoid endometrial injury. Strict sperm cutoffs for IUI. If all these are adhered to, we are able to unlock the signs of IUI success today.